Sometimes people pray for the future. Sometimes they write those prayers down. Most never imagine that years later, they might read those same words again and realize something extraordinary. For Mumboa, that realization came on an ordinary evening in Tokyo, and it began with a notebook she had almost forgotten. Mumboa was not the kind of woman who rushed through life. At 33, she had already learned something many people took longer to understand. Good things rarely grow in a hurry. She worked as a project coordinator for an international design firm, a job that occasionally allowed her to travel across Asia. Tokyo had become one of her favorite cities. There was something about the balance between tradition and modern life that fascinated her. On one particular visit, she stayed with her longtime friend Kasioka, who had recently moved to Japan. One evening, while unpacking her suitcase in Kasioka's apartment, Mumboa found something at the bottom of her bag, a small journal. She opened it out of curiosity. Inside were prayers she had written years earlier during a season when she had been deeply reflecting on her future. One page caught her attention. It was dated 5 years earlier, and at the top she had written, "A prayer for the man I might one day marry." She smiled slightly as she read the words she had written long ago. "Lord, wherever he is, guide him. Help him grow into the man you designed him to be, and prepare me to recognize him when the time comes." Mumboa shook her head gently. She had completely forgotten she wrote that prayer. Closing the journal, she whispered softly, "Well, whenever that happens." She had no idea how close that moment actually was. Across the city, another life was unfolding. Takuya was 43 and one of Tokyo's most respected architects. His designs were known for blending modern innovation with traditional Japanese aesthetics, clean lines, natural light, spaces that felt peaceful. But behind his professional success was a quieter personal story. Takuya had always been thoughtful and introspective. Unlike his younger brother Takaru, who had once prayed for 5 years to meet the woman he saw in Boston, Takuya had spent most of his life focused on building things. Buildings, projects, a reputation. Marriage had never been something he chased. Still, faith had slowly become part of his life after watching the transformation in his brother. Takaru's story, the one about the woman he prayed for, had deeply impacted him. One evening, 2 years earlier, Takuya had done something unusual. He opened a notebook and wrote a prayer. "God, if marriage is part of my future, guide me to someone whose heart seeks you first." He closed the notebook afterward and never thought about it again. At least, not until much later. One Saturday evening, Kasioka invited a few friends over for dinner. Among them was someone she thought Mumboa might enjoy meeting. "My friend Takuya is coming," she mentioned casually while preparing tea. "He's an architect." Mumboa smiled. "I always enjoy meeting creative people." When Takuya arrived later that evening, the conversation flowed easily. He was thoughtful, soft-spoken, observant, the kind of man who listened carefully before speaking. Mumboa noticed something almost immediately. He carried a calmness that made conversations feel comfortable, and Takuya noticed something too. Her warmth, her curiosity, her genuine interest in people. At one point during dinner, Kasioka laughed and said something unexpected. "You two have something in common." They both looked at her. "What?" Mumboa asked. "You both pray about everything." Takuya smiled slightly. "Guilty." Mumboa laughed. "I do pray a lot." The evening ended with warm goodbyes. Neither of them realized the story had quietly begun. Over the next few weeks, Mumboa and Takuya met several more times. Coffee here, a garden walk there. The easy rhythm of two people who had discovered they spoke the same language even when talking about very different things. Their connection grew naturally, without pressure, without urgency. One evening, while visiting a bookstore café, something unusual happened. The bookstore café was the kind of place that seemed designed for exactly this sort of evening. Shelves of books on every wall. Soft, warm light. The quiet hum of a city visible through the window but somehow kept at a comfortable distance. Mamboya had brought her journal that evening without really thinking about it. It was habit, she often carried it. Takuya's sketch notebook sat open beside his coffee cup, a half-finished architectural detail drawn in careful pencil lines. When she told him about the prayer, the one she had found at the bottom of her suitcase, written 5 years earlier, his expression changed in a way she hadn't expected. Not surprised, something quieter than that, recognition. "Can I show you something?" he said. He reached for the sketch notebook, turned past the architectural drawings, and found a page near the back. He placed it on the table between them. Mamboa leaned forward. The handwriting was careful, measured, the handwriting of a man who thought before he wrote. "God, if marriage is part of my future, guide me to someone whose heart seeks you first." She read it twice, then looked up. "When did you write this?" 2 years ago, he said. "After watching what happened with my brother." Mamboa was very still for a moment. Then she opened her journal, found the page dated 5 years earlier, placed it beside his. They both looked down at the 2 pages, 2 different notebooks, 2 different years, 2 different cities when the prayers were written, and yet, a partner who loved faith, a life built on purpose, someone whose path would cross theirs at the right time. The requests were not identical, but they were asking for the same person, from different directions, with different words, but with the same heart. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. The bookstore café continued quietly around them. Someone turned a page nearby. A coffee machine hummed softly. Outside, Tokyo moved through its ordinary evening. But inside, at a small table between 2 notebooks placed side by side, something had just become impossible to ignore. Takuya laughed quietly, not the laugh of someone amused, the laugh of someone who has just understood something. "It seems," he said, "God may have been listening." Mamboa looked at the 2 pages, then at him. "He always was," she said softly. "We just didn't know he was answering both at once." The lanterns in Kyoto swayed gently as they sat together that evening, the 2 notebooks open between them, reading the prayers again, now on the other side of the answer. Takuya had proposed earlier in a quiet garden, simply, honestly, the way he did everything. No grand staging, no performance. Just 2 people who had been moving toward each other across years and prayers, and one dinner at a friend's apartment. Mamboa had said yes before he finished the sentence. Now, sitting in the lantern light, she thought about Takaru, Takuya's younger brother, the man who had once sat in a Boston cafe and watched a woman laugh and never spoken to her, who had prayed for 5 years, who had found Muna on a park bench in Japan with a Bible in her lap. She thought about how Takaru's story had been the thing that moved Takuya to open his own notebook, to write his own prayer, to believe that faith could reach into the most personal corners of a life. In a way, Takaru's 5-year prayer had produced 2 answers, one for himself, one for his brother. "Do you ever think about how connected all of this is?" Mamboa asked. Takuya looked at the notebooks. "I think about it constantly," he said quietly. She smiled, because she did too. Ida and Matthew, a dream that came before the meeting. Takaru and Muna, a prayer that survived 5 years of silence. Kavuli and Masahiro, the same prayer on the same night in the same city. Mongeli and Hiroyuki, surrender and a rain shelter. Wavinya and Sanada, a prophecy that took 2 years to understand. And now, 2 notebooks, 2 prayers, 1 author, 6 stories, 6 arrangements, each one different, each one unmistakably his. But the universe was not quite finished. Because somewhere in the same city, attending the same international church where so many of these stories had begun, a young woman named Kamine had recently done something bold. She had asked God for a sign, a specific one, something obvious. She had laughed when she prayed it, certain nothing like that would happen. She did not yet know about the man who would walk into a volunteer project the following weekend, or what he would be carrying when he found her in a park a few days later. But God knew. He always had, because in God wrote this love story, every prayer is heard, every answer is prepared, and the final chapter was already being written. She found it at the bottom of her suitcase, a prayer she had written 5 years earlier, a prayer for a man she hadn't yet met. Across the city, an architect had opened his sketch notebook 2 years before, passed the architectural drawings, and written a prayer near the back, for a woman whose heart sought God first. He closed the notebook, never thought about it again, until a bookstore café. Until 2 notebooks placed side by side on a table, until the realization that God had been answering both prayers at once, long before either of them arrived in the same city. That is that God wrote this love story universe, Japan. 7 stories, 7 prayers, 1 author. Watch Story 7, the grand finale next, and subscribe to Written by Grace. God is not finished writing.